Okay, so Tricia, let's start with this. What first brought you to Bethel? And then what other roles, and this can be official or unofficial, did you fill during your years at Bethel?
Okay. I was teaching in junior high in Colorado and met a couple of Bethel grads and got to know them. And we decided to get an apartment together, which we did. And they said, you really should. And I had already gotten my master's. They said, you need to go work at Bethel. I said, Bethel, where is that? And they said, Minnesota. And I said, where is that? So anyway, it was with their urging, I did ask Bethel if they had any openings in the physical education department, and went through the process and got hired for that. And so that was how I got there. And I was a relatively new Christian. I had just accepted the Lord about a year before. And so it was a wonderful experience to live with these two women who were very strong Christians and, had had the Bethel experience too. So
So when you first came, were you teaching the physical education department? Were you a professor? I think you were also a coach as well, right?
yeah, I was teaching in physical education and coaching. Um, I did that for 9 years. I was in the physical education department. And I began to realize that things I enjoyed more than actually being in the classroom were administrative things. I loved advising, supervising student teachers. And while I was in the department, Carol Morgan, who was the other woman in the department, and I developed a major in physical education, went through the process with the State Department of Education here in Minnesota, and got that major approved. Um, so those are the types of things that I began to feel like I really enjoyed more than just being in the classroom. I don't want to downplay being in the classroom. I don't mean just being in the classroom. So I went and talked with the dean after I'd been there about 7 years. I went and talked with the dean, and he said to ask him if there was any administrative area in the college that he could see me fitting into. And he said, let's have you finish that PhD first, and then we'll talk again. So within 2 years after that, I did finish the PhD and went and talked with him. And then I moved into the academic dean's office as assistant to the dean. And then after a few years, I was associate dean. But when I retired, I was dean of academic programs. So it was 24 years there in the dean's office, and a lot of different positions. And a lot of things change as the provost changes or as the dean changed. There were certainly different things that happen.
So you said you weren't all that familiar with Bethel when you started. How would you describe Bethel College and Seminary in the 1970s?
Okay, that was one of your questions. I would consider it a small liberal arts college at that time. Um, and from what I experienced, it was in a sense secondary to the seminary. If there were financial crunches, the college had to take care of those. And yeah, that's what I would look at it. And then when I left 24 years, 33 years later, I would have considered it a large liberal arts college, later a university. That happened even after I left. And I no longer saw it secondary to the seminary. The college, well, college was important, more important at that point. Much higher enrollment. When I started there, the enrollment was in the hundreds. And so it was much higher enrollment when I left 32 years later. They had developed a lot of adult programs, the PACE program, graduate programs. So that was really expanded, in the years that I was there, and I'm sure it has since I left. Um, the thing that was still the same thing was the Christian emphasis. Um, I've been gone for 23 years, so I'm speaking from, when I was there. Those would be the things that I saw and things I saw change. And you have to remember, I was at Bethel for 33 years, and I've been retired 24 years. So these are things that happened 50 years ago. So I hope they're all accurate. I think I still have my right mind.
Tricia, how would you describe the development of women's athletics during your time at Bethel, and how significant were those changes?
That's the major thing that I would say I saw discrepancies, because I felt women had an equal place in most places at the university, at the college, but the physical education department, particularly athletics, was a huge difference. Trying to find, here it is. When I came, they only had 2 sports for women, basketball and field hockey. And when I came, my first year, I started volleyball and softball. And it was like pulling teeth to get access to the facilities or to get any budget. This was also a time of nationwide trying to get women into athletics. This was before the Title IX in 1972. So those first 2 or 3 years, I'm sure my department chair did not appreciate me much, because I was constantly in his office. He was the athletic director too, asking for money for, well, even for games. I mean, away games that we played, we had to take student cars. I mean, the men's teams took a bus. We had to take student cars because there wasn't a budget for it. And that was fine if we were in Minnesota, I mean, in the Twin City area, if we were playing the University of Minnesota. And that's one of my claims to fame, is my softball team beat the University of Minnesota softball team. I don't think that's happened anymore, but anyway, that was fine. But we were traveling to down to Carlton, St. Olaf, Gustavus, St. Cloud. I mean, we were traveling a lot of different places, and many of those games were at night. And so I was always just so fearful that something might happen with students driving all those things. There was no money for uniforms. Carol and I scraped up as much as we could get out of the budget, and then the students even had to chip in and pay some on their uniforms. See, let me got my notes here and see if there's anything else. Oh, the women had the gym for 3 hours on Tuesday night, and that was it. We could use it for intramurals, or we could use it for one of the athletic teams. So that was also a constant battle. And I would have to say that the 3 men in the department who were coaches were wonderful Christian men, but they were used to having everything they wanted. Well, not at Bethel, they didn't have everything they wanted, because finances were always an issue, but they were used to pretty much controlling the facilities and the budget. And so I was constantly complaining about that. Carol, the other teacher in the department, she was nicer than I was. She had been a Christian for many years and knew what it was like to work in a Christian institution with limited resources. But let me see, look at my notes here. But it was just a constant battle to get facilities and money for the women. And then also when sometimes we'd be practicing in the gym, and some of the men students would come and sit in the bleachers and just laugh and make fun of them. You know, they had not really seen very many women in athletics. So I was not a very popular person with the men athletes, because I would kick them out of the gym if they were disrespectful to the women. But it was just a constant battle. I think that would be my thinking on that. And even the men didn't have good facilities. I mean, there were no facilities on campus. We were on the old campus, and even the men had to go elsewhere for football games and track meets and that kind of thing. So we all just struggled along together there. And then when Title IX was approved in 1972, there was a little more pressure on the institution then to give the women things, because Title IX was to create equality between men and women in athletics. So I think that's the way I would describe. That was the biggest discrepancy that I saw at Bethel in women and men. Like I say, it was part of a national issue at that point too. It wasn't just Bethel.
Why was it important to you as someone who started a couple of teams, was, championing women's athletics? Why was it important to you for women to have those kinds of opportunities?
Well, why shouldn't they? I mean, the women could be just as skilled in athletics as the men in their own right, And everything that I was fighting all those years was for the women students, because I think they deserve to have. I mean, some of them might have come from Iowa, where basketball was big, and for women at that time. But the others had never really had any opportunity to be on a team, yet they had some skills. And I think those needed to be honored, and that was what it was.
Okay. Tricia, which women impacted you the most during your time at Bethel? For example, did you have a mentor? Was there a role model?
There were three women that probably role models for me. The first one was Marilyn Starr. Marilyn was the Dean of Women at the time that I came. She had formerly been in the physical education department, but she was the Dean of Women. She was a real mentor for me. I mean, again, me being basically a new Christian too. Marilyn was a role model for me as a strong Christian woman. She was a mentor for me. She was the only woman in administration at Bethel. I think I remember that correctly. There was no other woman in administration at Bethel. She helped me grow as a Christian. We just became very close friends. Another one was Janet Lundbeck, who was the chairwoman of the education department. And Janet was a person who had very high expectations of her students. I think the students, sometime when they had to meet with her, were just quaking in their shoes because they were so nervous about it, because she had very high expectations, yet she was also a very caring person. And she helped me to see ways that I could deal with students, with that expectation, yet still being very careful and caring for them. She showed me how to make the best come from my students, how to bring the best of them out. And then the third person was Carol Morgan. Carol was the other woman in the physical education department. She was a Wheaton grad, very strong Christian, and again, just helped me to become a deeper Christian, she was a great role model for me, because I'd get so upset about something that we didn't have, and she would calmly, try to calm me down before I'd go to the department chair to rant and rave. She was the opposite of me in dealing with the men coaches in the department. But she helped me to be less aggressive in a negative way in the department. So I still keep in touch with her, and we're still friends. And those three women would be the ones that were role models for me.
So you said that Marilyn Starr was Dean of Women when you were there. When did the Dean of Women, Dean of Men positions go away? And do you know why that happened?
I didn't know they went away. That must have happened after I left, because I didn't know they went away. They don't have a Dean of Men or Dean of Women?
No, not as long as I've been here.
Okay, well, I don't know anything about that. So.
That's okay. I was just curious. Tricia, next question. You've already said that for you, the biggest discrepancy was found in women versus men's athletics at Bethel. Were there any other ways in which it was difficult to be a woman? Were there any other gaps in policies, differences in expectations that you saw or experienced?
No, not really. I mean, I think I was always treated very respectfully as a woman. After I'd been in the dean's office a couple of years, there were two of us that were associate deans. And I had a feeling that his salary was much higher than mine. I don't know what made me think that, but I went to the dean and told him that I sensed that that was true and what was he going to do about it. And that year, then when my contract came out, it was significantly higher than the normal increase that anybody else got. So that was the only time that I really felt discrimination there, other than in athletics. But when I was on the faculty, as far as other women in different departments, I never really knew anybody's salary, so I don't have any idea at the time if there were discrepancies there. So I'm sure in talking to Kathy Nevins, you'll get a different story, because she was one that felt there were discrepancies.
Tricia, as you think back over your years at Bethel, are there any transitional moments that stand out? Whether you remember a specific year or simply maybe a change that took place, what are some of the key changes in the women's history at Bethel that you saw?
I would say, well, what I've already said, Title IX in 1972 would be something that created a significant change. The other significant thing I saw was the development of the nursing program at Bethel, which was predominantly women in both the students and the faculty. They did have a few men in the faculty, but it was predominantly women, which I assume nursing all over is that pretty much that way. But that brought, well, there were national standards that Bethel had to meet to have a nursing program. You know, there were state regulations, there were national standards, and it brought more people onto the faculty. I think they had about 7 or 8 women faculty when they first started the program. So it just gave numbers and strength with the women on the faculty. And they had then more women students too, because the majority of students for the nursing program were women. And Bethel became known in the medical community in the Twin Cities as producing high quality nursing grads. So that was something. Some of the people at Bethel were against a nursing program when we were talking about it. They didn't feel it fit into a liberal arts college. So there were some battles there for the people that were working on the nursing program. But that was a significant time, I think, because it, like I said, it brought more women on the faculty, it brought more women students, and then the Title IX. Those would be the two most significant things that I can think about.
As an academic dean, Tricia, were there other moments where you saw maybe there was an influx of women hired beyond even the nursing department, or when the composition of a department or an office tilted to being maybe even majority women, or women taking on leadership roles within the institution?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't think of any specific examples, but it just sort of evolved. In my 33 years at Bethel, it just evolved. People fighting for those things, you know, like my fights in the athletic area, and other women faculty certainly spoke out and were, you know, very, very strongly recommending more women. But I can't think of any specific areas where that was true. You know, like even with the nursing department, even the people that were against that, those would be some of the people that were down in your area in the history, philosophy, those departments. They came around, you know, and had a totally different idea, and still felt good about Bethel being a liberal arts college. Yet we did have programs that they originally didn't think were liberal arts. education was a strong program at Bethel when I came, and it was when I left. It had always been a very strong program. So, yeah, I'm sure there are women. I'm sure there are some women that, felt discrimination, but I never really knew what specifically about any of them.
Well, maybe generally, how would you compare your experience as a woman at Bethel to your experience as a woman in other settings? So this could be within family, within church, within the wider academy, American society.
Well, like I've said, I pretty well felt respected as a woman at Bethel, so I didn't feel a lot of difference there than I did in my church, where I had several leadership positions there, and a family and society. So I guess I can't speak to any problems of it being significantly different than any of those other areas.
Are there any other memories or reflections that maybe you haven't had a chance to talk about that you'd like to share with us?
I think we pretty well covered everything that I had thought I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I think that's it. I know we haven't done our full hour, but
Okay. Ellie, did you have any other questions you want to ask? Okay, well, as a last question, Tricia, this isn't on your sheet, but I think it's a good exit question for you. It's been a while since you've been at Bethel, but what are your hopes for Bethel, for the university, for its student staff, maybe especially for its women?
well, from what I know about it, having what I've heard from other people after I left, I would just hope that it would continue to keep the Christian emphasis. That would definitely be a part of the institution. That they would continue to give as many women students as they could. I don't even know, maybe there are more women students now than there are men. Is that true? Yeah. With education and nursing being two of the popular programs, I'm sure that's true. I just would pray that God would continue to bless Bethel, and the seminary, the whole program there, and all those graduate programs that we're starting there or have started. I hope those also continue to be successful, and that there also you could keep the Christian emphasis, which would be probably a little harder to do when you get into graduate programs and people coming from all different backgrounds. They're not like a high school senior who's a Christian who comes. So I just would trust that Bethel would continue the emphasis of being leaders in the community, that people know they are Christians and that God is blessing Bethel with those things.